Hi, I'm Mike Shea, author of Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master and SlyFlourish.com. This is the third video in which I go through the adventure Lost Mine of Phandelver, the 5th edition published adventure that comes with the D&D Starter Set. In previous episodes of this, I talked about Chapter 1, in which the characters fought off a bunch of goblins, Chapter 2, in which they went to the town of Phandalin, and now we're talking about Chapter 3, which is a whole series of adventure locations set outside of Phandalin. As I mentioned in the previous video, Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 interweave a lot. You can decide where the characters can go. The characters can decide whether they leave Phandalin and come back again, or whether they stay in Phandalin and deal with the Red Brand hideout at the time. I think it's really interesting to take Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 and think of them as a small campaign unto itself, that it's a sandbox where the characters can go in many different locations and see many different things and come back and figure it out. So they don't have to dissect the whole Red Brand thing and go through the whole Red Brand hideout before they start exploring some of these other locations. Chapter 3 has 5 different adventure locations in it, 3 that are relatively small and 2 big ones. The three small ones are Conyberry, in which the characters deal with a banshee, the Old Owl Well, in which they deal with an evil wizard, and Wyvern Tor, in which they deal with a bunch of orcs. I've actually never run the Wyvern Tor one. I've run the other 2 many times, but I've never really felt like bringing orcs in when you're already dealing with a bunch of hobgoblins. Going to Cragmaw Castle is pretty important in particular because that's where you get to Gundren Rockseeker, who then takes you to Wave Echo Cave, which is Chapter 4 of the adventure. So that's a pretty critical one. Thunder Tree, though, is a really interesting and fun place to run as well. In this case, the map you see on the left there is from Thunder Tree. It's an abandoned village or abandoned town where everything is gone, but there's a lot of different things going on. There's an old druid who's hanging out there. There's a bunch of little awakened spriggans and weird plant creatures that are attacking. There's a group of dragon cultists, which we can use if we want to foreshadow, if we plan on either running the Horde of the Dragon Queen adventure, or we plan on, or they've already run Horde of the Dragon Queen, that your players may already be familiar with Horde of the Dragon Queen. It can be cool to run in the Cult of the Dragon again. So the fact that there's some dragon cultists here can be pretty interesting. But most importantly, there is a dragon here in Thunder Tree. It's a young green dragon named Venomfang, and he can be very, very deadly if we're not careful. Now, there can be circumstances where Venomfang can breathe. His most deadly ability is the fact that he breathes for a ton of damage, and any characters are not going to be able to survive his breath weapon. If he only hits 2 or 3, it's possible those who don't get knocked out by it can be recovered, can be revivified, or can be potions can be given to them and get them back on their feet again. But it can be really tricky. More interesting is when the characters start to role play with Venomfang, or even perhaps set up the dragon cultists. In at least a couple of times that I've run this adventure, the dragon cultists have been tricked into going to Venomfang, and Venomfang has been tricked into thinking the dragon cultists are enemies, and they end up wiping each other out rather than the party having to get involved. But I've also seen the parties get very careful and go very tactical and find a way to attack the dragon and not get killed. So that can be very interesting as well. But pay special attention to Venomfang, read his abilities before you go, and recognize the fact that he can very easily wipe out your party. This is also the chapter where one of the doppelgangers is introduced. There's a doppelganger introduced in Cragmaw Castle. I think it's more interesting to have a couple of doppelgangers that work for the final villain in this adventure and may already be integrated somewhere in Phandalin. So while you can reveal one of the doppelgangers in Cragmaw Castle, it can also be more interesting to have that doppelgangers shouldn't just show up in one battle and never be seen again. They are spies that are always present at various situations. So that can be a fun one. So I really like this chapter. I really like how this chapter and Chapter 2 interweave. And I think using the various adventure locations from this chapter and mixing it in with revisiting Phandalin and dealing with the NPCs there can build a much more interesting and much more dynamic overall adventure than trying to run a sequence. So I hope this video was useful. We have one video left to go in which we will talk about Chapter 4, Wave Echo Cave. If you enjoyed this video, please check out my book, Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.